I never get tired of how fucking much these people lie. So it's no surprise we know that they've been denying that the protests were violent for a very long time. Ballsy enough to stand in front of burning buildings. Camera crews that were personally attacked by rioters claiming, oh, no, no violence here. CNN reporters. We had just had another progressive murder, another Trump supporter, unprovoked, just this week, who of course turned out to be such a violent, sadistic psychopath that he basically committed suicide by cop attacking police shortly after they finally decided to arrest him after, once again, civilians on the internet had to identify this guy. Meanwhile, what are progressives doing with the shooter, Reinhold, or however you say his name? Vice decides we're going to interview him and give him a platform to say, oh, it was self-defense. We have people asking Donald Trump to frickin' poison jury pools, basically, by condemning shooters before they're even charged with shit. In this case, that would be Kyle Rittenhouse, who is completely innocent. Kyle Rittenhouse, by the way, had his GoFundMe taken off of GoFundMe because, of course, you can't have violent criminals on GoFundMe except for the justified police shooting that caused, was it Jacob Blake? Yeah, the guy who had a knife and was shot by cops. His family has a GoFundMe up. That's a violent criminal. He was the cops were called on him because he was beating his girlfriend, or the mother of his kids at least, whether she was his wife or not, I don't know. Attacked police, then escaped arrest. Again, remember how a couple of weeks ago I was talking about how tasers don't do shit? Tased him, didn't do shit, because again, tasers are highly ineffective weapons, and cops need to be allowed to use nightsticks and mace on these kinds of people, but apparently they're not allowed to. So fucking that guy gets shot. His family gets a GoFundMe. The guy who attempted to assassinate Kyle Rittenhouse with a false surrender, a cowardly, evil attempted murderer, has not only not yet been charged with attempted murder, not been charged with being a felon in illegal possession of a firearm, but it also has a GoFundMe, which is allowed to be on GoFundMe. But not Kyle. Now, the crazy thing is some of these YouTube progressives, particularly the psychotic conspiracy theorist, the Alex Jones of progressives known as David Pakman, as well as TYT, are actively denying that riots are even occurring at all. They're not saying, oh, these are peaceful protests. They're just saying, oh, there's no violence, while commenting on a speech that Trump gives in front of a building that was burned to the fucking ground. Yeah, that didn't happen. But we're going to comment on what Trump said in front of this building and say that building's not been burned to the ground after being looted. Yeah, you fucking liars. So, the one lie that I wanted to mention before we finish up on a short video here is a lie that is older than this Trump derangement syndrome BLM riot type shit. Older than this modern Antifa shit. And that is the lie of police escalation. You've been hearing particularly Portland mayor and terrorist Ted Wheeler saying that that presence of riot police or presence of federal police is a provocation that justifies rioting, violence, and murder, because it's an escalation of force simply for these cops to be there. This is a delusional lie that leftist rioters have been telling for decades, that just the existence of anti-riot police causes riots, even if the police just stand there in case a riot occurs. Them being there is actually what causes a riot to occur, which makes no fucking sense. Because I gotta tell you, if I was a demonstrator, and maybe if I was even a demonstrator who wanted to set some shit on fire, burn some trash cans, throw some rocks, if I saw riot cops, I'd quiet down, because riot cops is the one time where the cops have all the leeway in the world to kick your fucking ass, mace the shit out of you, and arrest you with extreme prejudice. And you can't sue them because they're responding to a fucking violent riot. The person who has provoked the presence of fucking riot cops are rioters. So it's completely ass backwards and an utter lie every single solitary time it's told. It's never ever been true and never will be true that riot cops cause riots. Never. They are a response to riots in order to create peace. And the reason why Portland has been burning for over 3 months and was in fact burning at multiple points over the past 3 years is because Portland mayors, by the way, there was a excellent Twitter post a while back, a couple of weeks ago, where somebody detailed at length the history of the kind of scum-sucking monsters that have been Portland police, oftentimes homosexual rapists, child rapists, and I'm not talking about like molesters or people who seduced young girls. I'm talking about forcible rape, not just statutory rape, but forcible, aggravated rape. A mayor or two ago was an aggravated rapist. The Portland mayor just before Ted Wheeler was a member of By Any Means Necessary, which is a domestic terrorist organization. Ted Wheeler himself has not been tied to the organizations of riots, but he's done everything in his power to protect and promote them, and has done the most to promote this narrative that Trump is evil for ever sending in federal police because it's an authoritarian move. No. The reason why all these riots are happening and why they're absolutely not Trump's fault is because Trump does not have the authority to send in federal troops into a state situation. And the only time he has sent in federal troops, particularly Department of Homeland Security, which is not a military organization but a law enforcement organization, so troops isn't the accurate term, that he sent in federal officers to quell a riot, is when rioters have attacked federal property inside of the state. And how is that any great mystery? How is that any kind of overreach of power? It's simply not. The fact of the matter is Trump has been righteous at every single angle of this, and the progressives have been pure, unadulterated evil and have caused the deaths of dozens of people. Ted Wheeler belongs not just in prison, but on a gallows with a rope around his neck. He is a traitor to the United States and has done everything in his power to completely deny his oath of office to protect and serve the people of Oregon, and that he has basically caused these deaths, caused tens of millions of dollars in damage. And you also have progressives crying that Trump is refusing to send federal aid to people who have refused federal law enforcement and then refused to use their own state and local law enforcement to police these riots. But somehow the federal taxpayer at large, all Americans, are somehow responsible for paying for the damages caused directly by progressive terrorists and allowed by progressive terrorists who have been elected into office in these shithole states like Oregon and Washington and Minnesota. How does anybody think Trump's going to lose this election without insane amounts of voter fraud, ballot stuffing, and ballot harvesting in particular the Democrats are planning to do? There's part of the reason why they're trying to maintain the shutdown till November is so they can keep people from voting in person. Not that the trend of voting in person has ever stopped progressives from doing things like voting twice. In fact, a congresswoman, I forget from which state, admitted on camera to voting twice, which is a fucking felony. Like, come on. These people are pure evil, and all they do is lie, and the lies they tell are so fucking blatant and hysterical. You know, David Pakman, just to bring it back home to my original point about the shit they were saying about Trump, is he was interviewing somebody who was the owner of a store that had been looted. And the progressives thought they had this big gotcha moment when they proved that who Trump spoke to was a guy who had owned the store for a long point of time, but was not the current owner of the store that burned down. And they tried to call him a crisis actor, oddly enough using a somewhat right-wing conspiracy theory, the concept of crisis actors. Why would you promote a kind of phrase like that when you're the kind of person who tries to decry every kind of conspiracy theory, whether it's rather accurate or not, whether it's plausible or some space alien shit? Doesn't seem to matter. Why would you use a term that you yourself have demonized unless you were a retarded fucking idiot? An absolute reactionary who constantly uses the rhetoric of the right wing because you have such derangement that you think the only way to beat the right wing is, instead of maybe telling the truth or adapting to the truth of a situation, to use the rhetoric of the right wing, even some of the most far out and unclean words like crisis actor. Like, why would you do that? And the guy's not a crisis actor. He's a guy who did own the store. Maybe it's a slight very technical dishonesty if he's not the current owner of the store, but it's a man who had worked in the building for a long period of time, and now we're standing in front of it. It has been razed to the ground by progressive terrorists, talking about how it was razed to the ground by progressive terrorists. And you have like Anna Kasparian saying, oh, this alleged violence, alleged rioting. Hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, which of course, if we even admit that the damage has occurred, it's on the federal taxpayers' responsibility to repair it, even though it was destroyed by local politicians. Absolute fucking insanity. How can you not understand that these people are fundamentally, outrageously evil? They are the purest form of subhuman, degenerate scum, and in a just world, they would be destroyed. They'd be either banished, imprisoned for life, or killed for their crimes, because they are guilty of high treason, murder, instigation of violence, terrorism, and murder of innocent civilians unprovoked. No possible justification. Meanwhile, they have tried to silence and smear anybody who defends themselves against their tyranny. This is psychotic. This is demented and deranged and fucking absolutely shocking. And these people cannot be given any sort of fucking leeway to continue to do this. When Trump wins in a landslide, I hope that he fucking starts using executive privilege, basically having to invoke wartime martial law type shit to shut this shit down. And I hope these thousands of protesters in all of these cities, fucking whatever they want to call themselves, these communist fucking protesters, including the politicians, district attorneys, mayors, and police chiefs that allowed it to happen, will be sent to prison on federal charges. There's no other way to put a stop to this. These people can't be mollycoddled, they can't be reasoned with, they can't be bargained with. They are insane, rabid animals, and they have to be put down.